Whole sports all plays. Whole sports all plays. 365, we making a plays. You talking the game, get you through the days. Behind the court, the dime in the lane. Variety topics never the same. All presentation, sports information. Hitting the airways, taking the nation. All sport, all plays, they working your faces. Grace at the field, so tie the laces. Whole sports all plays. Network. Whole sports all plays. Network. We on top of our game. All sports all plays. All sports all plays.
What's up? What's up? Welcome to Real Talk. Any more here? We got a couple of my guys here with me. My guy Mike Hughes. Mike, how you doing?
Bro, as good as I can, bro. As good as I can.
I know. This is a rough weekend. We're gonna get to that in a minute. Then I got my fellow Cowboy representative Tony Hollisworth. Tone, how you doing?
Yes, sir. I'm doing good. I'm excited to be on with you, Kenny. We both Cowboys fans, and we got the voice of the Windy City on with us. We got Mike, so we gonna have a good show.
No doubt. We got Dallas and Chi
and we got Freddie running. So no Freddie tonight. We did our thing.
You never know. That guy he'll hop on at any time. So
right.
As you said that, we might get.
I can hear his fingers typing on the stream.
Exactly. We might get a surprise appearance from
right.
Freddie. But let's get rolling. Go ahead, Tony. It's on you.
Alrighty, gents. So speaking of Freddie, we're gonna talk about his team right now. So we watched the Giants fall in a very close game against the Falcons yesterday. Both of the teams started out 0-2. It was one of our few winless team matchups. And the last two games for the Giants have been decided by 3 points or less. To you guys, is this a Daniel Jones problem? Is this a coaching problem? Or is this an upper management problem? Kenny, let's start with you.
Well, I would say I'm going to put it in order. So I'll say first is upper management because they haven't, Dave Gettleson, he's been the guy that came in and was talking about how he was going to fix this offensive line. And this is now going on 4 years where this offensive line has just been trash. So I think that's part of the problem too. That's the big, problem in terms of them not being as effective offensively as they should be because they have talent. As much as I hate the Giants, the facts are the facts that they have talent, at the skill positions and at running back. So they really have, talent that they should be able to be a little more explosive offensively. But you got to have time to be able to throw the ball, and you got to have holes to be able to run the ball. And so, until they address that situation, it's going to be a continued struggle for the Giants. So I think that's the number one problem. Secondly, I would go with the coaching because the Giants have been a really undisciplined team these last couple of weeks. They've had penalties that have killed them in these last two games, and to me, that goes to coaching. Joe Judge has talked about being this disciplinarian. Comes from the Belichick coaching tree, and the fact of the matter is they've had some crucial penalties that have killed them these last 2 weeks. And so to me, that's a lack of discipline, and discipline always goes back to coaching. So I think that's the second thing. And then the last thing I would say is the players. Defensively, I think they've taken a little bit of a step back. They have some injuries as well with Blake Martinez going down. But I just think that defensively, they're not as talented as we thought they were going to be coming into the season, and we're starting to see that. And I just think offensively, like I said, to start it, that as long as that offensive line is shaky, they're just going to continue to struggle all season. So I'll put it in that order in terms of who's the blame trio, if you want to call it.
How about you, Mike? What do you think?
I think Kenny nailed it on the head, but I also think it's a mix of a lot of things. Like we talked about, like Kenny mentioned, this is a very talented team, but this is also a very new and young team. There's a lot of things going on. Judge is still trying to solidify his offense and his identity and what he wants to make it become. At the start, going in the last year, he can identify that offense as Barkley, and you're going into that year going, this is Barkley's team. This is Barkley's offense. We're going to run the ball through him, and Daniel Jones will develop as he goes, and we'll figure it out from there. Bring in those weapons like a Kenny Galladay and a Rudolph and so on and so forth, could kind of just stretch out the field, space it out a little bit other than just Ingram and Shepard. But they did a really good job with that, but not being able to predict what was going to happen to Barkley to that level, I think really did hurt them. And him, like we said, with the offensive line, it has not been molded. We have a lot of things to talk about offensive lines today, but the Giants are definitely one of them, where I look at it and I'm like, it's been a talking for a very long time in New York. We've had
man, we go almost 10 years, man.
Going on 10 years about we're going to fix this. But can you name one perennial all-star type Pro Bowl type guy on that offensive line throughout the last 10 years that you picked up in not only the first round, but throughout the entirety of the 10 years that you picked up in free agency? So, you really haven't done anything with that. I look at the Lions as a perfect example. You really didn't get Stafford any type of help offensively. But then they go out and they get Penei Sewell. They actually took that chance on someone other than a defensive player that wasn't going to benefit Stafford or Goff. But they really did. So it's a step in the right direction. I think if they just were able to do that, it would definitely change things. I think there's a lot of different steps that they could go into to, whether it be via free agency or somewhere else. I think there's a lot of good things with this Giants team going forward. But to lose the ATL the way they did, I can't tell you one player on that defense. And I'm a defensive guy. Like, I'm a defensive minded guy. I couldn't name one of them. And that's just me. Maybe I've overlooked them a little bit, and I should go into that. You guys can tell me if I'm wrong. Is there anybody on ATL's defense I should be concerned about?
Oh no, defense been terrible for years.
Exactly. So
Grady Jarrett, I think his name is
That's
defensive
about it.
tackle.
And then
He's
the
solid.
They got a couple of good linebackers, but that's about it.
When you have, what Daniel Jones was supposed to be, you definitely did trade that pick. You could have got a Justin Fields. You could have got all these other guys via free agency or via draft. But you didn't. You didn't at the end of the day. You have all these weapons around them, but at the end of the day, these guys are cooking. Nobody's are cooking through your offensive line, and that's where it all starts.
Yeah, I'd agree, and I agree with Kenny. If I had to rank it in 1 to 3, I would put upper management at the very top of the list. Like both of y'all gentlemen said, this is a young team. They're actually not as bad as it seems. They took on the Broncos. I think the Broncos are a lot better, especially with the quarterback situation. The Broncos have just gotten better from that. I think Teddy Bridgewater kind of brought a little bit of swag to that team that they so desperately needed. And then they go and they face the Washington football team. And, of course, it was a divisional game. They kept it close. Daniel Jones has done everything you've asked him to do in the last 2 weeks. He's played smart football. He hasn't turned the ball over. He's been good with it. So, I mean, really, yeah, I would blame Dave Gettleman first more than anything that I would – even before I would blame probably my next biggest perp, and that would be Jason Garrett as far as coaching goes. And I say this, and I was actually talking with one of our guys, Doug Rush, about this. Jason Garrett, to me, is one of those, his play calling has gone very stale. If y'all remember back in 2006, 2007, when Tony Romo first took over as the starting quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys, they were red hot, and you had a very good talent in Tony Romo at that time. And I think he's what helped make Jason Garrett. And I say that because you look at when Tony Romo got hurt and all the quarterbacks that he bounced through, he didn't have success with any other quarterback other than Tony Romo until Dak Prescott came along, and he didn't know how to utilize Dak to his fullest extent.
And by that time, he wasn't even calling the plays, so he can't even take any credit for that.
Exactly. So to me, I would say Dave Gettleman first, because he's really that first key piece as far as getting those free agents. What your biggest free agent addition, at least on the offensive line side, is Nate Solder, and he's turned out to be a bust for you, and you just overpaid for him from the Patriots. And then you get into Jason Garrett, the play calling is stale, which again, it's sad. I think with this Giants team, it's a lot like how he was with Dallas. He's wasting a lot of these young players' potential and talent by not utilizing them and not mixing up the play calls, much like, unfortunately, my man Mike there has to deal with in Matt Nagy. He doesn't mix it up. He doesn't have good play calling, and it shows. And especially when you have a young, great back like Saquon in his prime years, this is the time to use him. And I agree with you, Kenny, as far as like the third piece, as much as I don't really like to give Daniel Jones a lot of credit, again, he's played solid football the last 2 weeks. You can't really ask much more from him. He's not forcing the ball. He's not getting those turnovers. He's actually holding on to the ball. He's not fumbling it. And I mean, yeah, the last 2 weeks, the Giants have been in a position to win. It's just collectively as a whole, that team has let them down. So to me, I think they've done everything they can. I think this is more of a coaching and upper management issue than it is an actual young team issue.
Yeah, I think the only other what they're going to have to do, I think, is, and like you guys said, we all agree that they're a talented team, and they're not that far away. It's just a couple of pieces here and there, especially if they could do something on the offensive line and just upgrade that. I think they have to spend a first round pick on the offensive line. Mike made a great point about Penei Sewell. Like, you got to really invest. I mean, they did a couple years ago with Andrew Thomas, but
Right.
Jury's still out on him. But you got to really invest and add, young pieces in terms of and high offensive caliber, talent in terms on that offensive line and young pieces, because that's what the Cowboys did. That's how the line got back to being what it was, in the heyday, is that they spent draft picks on that line. So
Right.
And it was a long-term process.
Yeah, but you got to invest in it, though. And they just
But I
been
think-
trying to piecemeal it.
I think personally, and I'll say it as a Bears fan, you have our first round pick for this year. You have your first round pick for this year. So
Right.
honestly, if I had to go into this offseason being the GM of the Giants, both of those picks go to the offensive line to me. And you know what? You might hate me on saying it, but to be quite honest, that second round pick as well, that is the Giants. I might invest in that as well. You might get a whole 3 studs potentially. If 2 of those 3 guys bank out, I mean, that's
Right.
a win.
Right.
The rest of your team looks good. You had a top 10 defense. You could fill out the holes throughout free agency. Your offense is young. You got those guys locked up in the books, and Barkley's not going anywhere. Jones isn't going anywhere. Ingram, Galladay, none of them are going anywhere. So use those 3 draft picks. And I know you don't like to, I know that's crazy, using 2 first-round draft picks and a second on offensive line.
Or at
but
least 2 of the 3.
Right.
Oh, yeah,
Or
but not
2
at
of
all,
the
though,
3,
because
however you want to do it. Yeah.
yeah,
Right,
the
but
only
it's that bad to the point where I don't want it to be like the Bears in 2018 after the double doink and you bring in 10 different kickers to see which one hits. But this is a type of position where 2 of the 3 of those guys hit, even if the third one is just serviceable, you got a great thing going for you. So I definitely would invest in that in the draft. I take that high in consideration. Unfortunately, I don't see there being a Penei Sewell type guy in this draft, but you can definitely find a very good, talented guy. He might not be generational, but he'll be good.
Yeah, and I'd even argue too, if you look at the rest of the Giants team, what else are they going to really invest in?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. They did
you have
everything else.
great
It's really
tight
just
ends.
depth.
You have great wide receivers.
Right.
Your defense is still solid. You have probably the best secondary in the division, at least on paper, with Logan Ryan, James Bradbury, Adoree Jackson, Xavier McKinney, and Jabril Peppers on your safety side. So I mean, really, you're solid everywhere else except that offensive line. So I don't think it would be crazy for them to spend 3 draft picks, especially their three first picks, their first round and second round, because again, most of the time those guys are going to be your starters. And then Will Hernandez, I think he's their left guard or right guard. I think they interchange him in the guard
Left
position.
guard, I think.
Yeah.
Has been solid. So I mean, heck, like y'all said, if you can get 2 or 3 of those guys to hit, that's 4 of your 5 starting offensive line, and you can make up a lot for that.
Right.
Young
Andrew,
have
the
one
jury,
drafted.
like Kenny said, the jury's still out on him. He could still develop into a great talent. If you bring in better pieces around him,
Exactly.
he'll look
Correct.
even. Look at Robert Quinn right now. Robert Quinn in his second year with the Bears. I mean, you have Akeem Hicks, you have Khalil Mack. He's got 2 sacks in 2 games. Like guys make you look
Talent.
better. And I
Absolutely.
don't care what anybody says. Basketball is different. Baseball is different. It's kind of more individual. But football, man, I'm telling you.
Ultimate team sport. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
It's an ultimate team sport. A safety that has a career of 0 interceptions. If you get a good pass rush in there, the guy can have 7 by the end of the season. That's just how good it is. And especially from the offensive side of things, I mean, that's going to make Daniel feel a hell of a lot safer about his job. Because right now, I mean, we don't know. Is the jury out on him? Could one of those first round picks be on a quarterback? I don't think so at this point.
And maybe I would say it depends on how the rest of the season goes.
Right.
Yeah, but you can't, to me, as much as we're talking about what they need to do in the offseason, you can't let Dave Gettleman make these picks. Like, you have to.
Without a doubt. You got
to
to
move on from him. You have 4 years to get this done, and you haven't gotten it done. And this could be 3 out of the 4 years where you have double-digit losses, like you're basically headed in that direction. There's no way that this guy should be able to keep his job.
For sure. Speaking of guys keeping their jobs, we're gonna switch topics a little bit. We're gonna move to Pittsburgh. So Ben Roethlisberger threw the ball 58 times yesterday. Big Ben's been in the league 18 years. For everybody that doesn't know, and they only ran the ball 15 times. We've seen this doesn't work. We've seen Dallas throw the ball 100 plus times. We've seen the Patriots do it and even make it to a Super Bowl throwing it a ridiculous amount of times, but it never really works as far as actually winning. Is it time for the Steelers to figure out a new game plan, or do you guys think there's something wrong with Najee Harris that we're not seeing? Because you spent a first-round draft pick on him, and he was considered one of the best running backs in the draft, and he's from one of the best schools that creates running backs as far as Alabama goes. What do y'all think?
Yeah, Mike.
Listen, I'm going to say it off rip. Najee Harris is a dog, an absolute monster. This guy is going to manhandle and take over the league within the next 2 to 3 years, with or without an offensive line. That's truly how I feel. I've watched this guy for so long. I've been a part of watching him develop, well, not physically, obviously, but him, Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, I've watched since I was 17 years old, playing in my own high school regime. I watched on Max Prep Sports. I'd watch their highlights. I'd watch these guys ball out. They are without a doubt solidified stars. The problem right now, and, I'm no shot at Mike Tomlin, but whoever's in charge of I don't know his name, whoever is in charge of the front office, making these decisions with the offensive line,
Colbert is his name.
Colbert, right? Yeah. It's 4 out of the 5 of these guys on this offensive line are brand new, and the only return is like a second-year right tackle. So for me, I'm looking at it like this. Najee, of course you want him to succeed. Of course you want him to be that guy, but he's not walking into Ezekiel Elliott-type rookie year with one of the best offensive lines. You don't want this guy to get eaten alive by his defenders. You don't, unlike some people who want to see these rookies fail. But different conversation. But with Najee, it's one of those things where I can't approve what you're doing with Big Ben because I understand that Big Ben just isn't there anymore. This isn't the Big Ben of old. This isn't the Big Ben we all know and love. Am I saying he's washed? No, by any means am I saying he's washed. But he's just not that guy you have to rely on. You have to build around Ben the way, not to say Brady's not great, but you have to do exactly what Tampa did for that situation with Brady. Okay, we'll give you Gronk, we'll give you Brown. We already have Evans and Godwin. We have a bunch of weapons to make you look great and come up for your shortcomings, maybe the turnovers later in your career. With Ben, you're immobile, you're injury prone, your passes aren't that accurate anymore. You have these wide receivers, but you had a great offensive line last year, and some retired, so that's completely understandable. You can't really do anything about that. You really can't. With the Bears, Kyle Long retired. It was a big hit. It was a big hit. So you hate it, but you can't, at the end of the day, blame the GM. But for you not to implement any type of plan to bring in any new faces, that are long-term faces, in a big free agency class, mind you, I felt like it was a huge disservice. And I'm at the point right now where if you want to throw the ball 58 times, and I'll say it right now, you guys might hate it, I'd rather have Dwayne Haskins getting the shot than Big Ben right now.
I can't totally disagree with you there because I'm saying it's Ben. Like, I think Ben is done, man. It was one play where he was like rolling to his right, and like he fell without no one. It was nobody around him. He just slipped and fell and couldn't complete the pass, and he just looked so old.
Had that life alert button on.
Yeah, man, he just looks so old, and that's one of those, just moments where you just realize, man, it's time. And I think you nailed it, Mike, when you talked about them not doing anything to address that line because, while you can't, like you said, you can't account for retirements, but you got the draft, you got free agency, you got to do something because, like you said, like Ben is a statue. Like he can't move around in that pocket anymore. He's not nimble. He's not, fleet of foot anymore. He's not able to extend plays like he used to. This guy's 39 years old. So, you got to do like you do with Brady. You got to give him a stout offensive line so he can be able to stand in that pocket and make plays. And I think as long as they don't do this, as long as they haven't address this offensive line issue, we're not going to be able to see the best of Najee Harris because, he's a stud. There's no question about it that he has the talent and the ability to be, a good back in this league. But again, just like we talked about with the Giants, if you don't have holes, you can't run. And the fact that they have to throw the ball 58 times, it just shows that they have no trust in them being able to run block to be able to get any effective yardage from the run game. So as long as they keep doing this, it's going to be a long season for Pittsburgh. And I feel bad for Mike Tomlin because he's a really good coach and he's just been nothing but, he's just, kept up a high standard during his time in Pittsburgh. And I just think he's in for the longest season of his career.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And I mean, I'm even looking at the Pro Football Focus of what they had Pittsburgh last year as far as their offensive line goes. You had guys that, you had David DeCastro, you had Andre Villanueva, you had there was another big name that they lost, and I know Marquise Pouncey retired.
Pouncey, yeah, he
Pouncey,
retired.
yeah, Pouncey retired. So I mean, still, even for you to, you lose Pouncey, why would you get rid of David DeCastro and why would you get rid of Alejandro Villanueva? Yes, they're older, but I mean, the guys that you had, they were still solid, and you were 17th. No, you're not top 10, but you're about middle of the pack. It's better than what you got now.
Yeah.
Pro Football Focus has them all the way down to 31 as far as the worst offensive line right now in football. That's not any better than 17 by no stretch of the imagination. And I'll agree with you guys. If you're looking at Najee Harris, like I said, you spent a first round pick on this man out of Alabama. You know the system that he goes into. Now, again, me personally, I've always been very critical of Alabama quarterbacks, mainly because you have first round talent at every single position there at Alabama. Alabama is a literal NFL churning school as far as every single position.
Absolutely.
As much as I don't like Alabama, I cannot discredit that. First round talent on O-line, running back, wide receiver, tight end, defense, and even their depth guys end up becoming first round picks when they get to start the next damn year. Everywhere except for quarterback. Quarterback's the only position that I'm still out on for Alabama.
Oh, no, that's a fact.
But yeah, and you ran the ball only 15 times, and one of those was by Ben, and you got 45 yards.
It's bad.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that Cincinnati's defense is trash. Cincinnati went out. They spent a lot of money in free agency to get a lot of good players. They have drafted extremely well the last couple of years. They did good in free agency. But are you really telling me, Pittsburgh, you can only run the ball 15 times and get 45 yards against Cincinnati's defense with a first round running back in Najee Harris? Really? Why are you putting that much trust and faith in Big Ben? You saw Big Ben crumble last year at the end of the season. And a lot of people have said that was the worst 11-0 team they had ever seen. And you're putting the ball back in Ben's hands, 18 years late, 18 years down the road, when, like Mike said, he has injury. He's not the big durable quarterback that he used to be in old. It took like 6 guys to bring this man down for a sack, and he'd still throw the ball like 50 yards and get a touchdown. So to me, I think it's a little bit of a disappointment. I agree with Mike. I think Najee is going to be one of those. He continues to dominate, even with a bad organization. Not trying to compare him to Barry Sanders, but I could see him having kind of that still able to produce with nothing really there to help him type of mentality. I even put it in my podcast kind of at the start of the season when I was doing predictions. I say the Pittsburgh Steelers need to actually have a losing record this year. I think they do need to tank a little bit, get some good round picks. You're solid on the defensive side of the ball. You paid TJ Watt. You have Minkah Fitzpatrick. You still solid on defense, but you need to do a complete overvamp on the offensive side of the ball. And you're not going to get, you can get solid players at, we'll say what, pick 14, 15. We'll put them right about in the middle.
Especially at the offensive line. You can find talent in the mid and the late first round.
And especially if you look at all these teams that are projected to have those high first round picks. Houston, Jets, Jags, Lions.
All have quarterbacks.
And all need help at the offensive line spot.
Right.
So,
it's going to be crazy.
It's going to be slim.
I was one of those people last year. My buddy Justin Chache, he's actually a really big Pittsburgh Steelers fan. You know, he just got a rib injury, hurt himself at football practice. So I'm praying for you if you're listening to this, big dog. But, you know, I was one of the people last year. He was so excited throughout that 11-0 stretch. And I kept telling him, you know, I feel like this team is so good. But if you were to just hold on for 1 second, maybe get a top 10 pick, you could sneak in and get your quarterback of the future and you'd be set. You wouldn't be having these Big Ben conversations right now. You know, you could have landed yourself a Mac Jones. You could have landed yourself a Justin Fields looking back on it. I don't think they would have been as bad enough to, you know, get a top 10 or a top 5 pick and get yourself a Zach Wilson or a Trevor Lawrence or a Trey Lance or something like that. But I definitely did think, you know, it's one of those times where you guys should definitely be not tanking, but trying to be that middle of the pack guy to try to get your franchise quarterback or something there, because Big Ben was not going to go forever. And you got lucky that Dwayne Haskins has the issues that he has. I just feel like, you know, going into this year, if they do have a really crappy pick or a really crappy record, you have your Spencer Rattlers out there. You have your Sam Howell. So do you go out and do you get that offensive line fixed, or do you get your quarterback in the future? Because I don't really trust. I trust Mike Tomlin. I trust Mike Tomlin to be able to fix any player in the NFL. I feel like he could take Cam Newton right now, and Cam would not only get vaxxed, but Cam would be preaching for everybody to get vaxxed. That's how this guy can make you run through a wall. Like it's just to that level. But with Dwayne Haskins, he's one of those. He's a tough situation. And not only do I know, you know, Tony, I don't know how you feel, but it's not only just like a mental aspect with Haskins. I feel like it's actually your play that I question as well. I don't know if you're NFL ready. I don't know if you truly understand how to read defenses. So I think there's a lot of questions, not only O-line, that you got to address with this offense.
Yeah, I'd agree, because I mean, I'm always one of those, you know, I'm never really sold whenever I see a quarterback only start 1 year in college. I don't feel like you really have enough time to learn. Yes, you still learn on the bench, you still work with the offensive coordinator, you still work with your quarterback's coach,
Right.
you still work with all of that, but it's different when you're on the field. You know, you can be the best guy at reading film, you can study, you know, the work will show, but your on the field performance will be something that speaks entirely different on its own. And I would say, all honesty, I don't think Dwayne's ready. And I say that because if you look at when he was with Washington has a very solid offensive line. You know, they're not top 10. I would put them at about 12th, 13th in the league. Bill Callahan did wonders for that offensive line. You still have Brandon Sheriff. They picked up, if I remember right, Charles Leno from the Bears in free agency. He was solid for you guys. Sorry to kind of poke that scab, Mike.
No, we were cool with it. We were cool with it.
I say he wasn't terrible, but he wasn't great either. And you know, you had a number 1 receiver in Terry McLaurin. You know, you had, you know, a pretty good running back in Antonio Gibson, and you at the time you had an elite defense. But we'll talk a little bit about that in the next segment. So to me, I don't know if Dwayne really is ready. You know, with what I've seen in Washington, not saying Washington is a perennial franchise, but with what he had, I think he was in a better situation than he is in Pittsburgh. Now, don't get me wrong, you know, to Mike Tomlin's credit and Ron Rivera, both phenomenal coaches. But, you know, to me, again, just looking at it from what he had in Washington as compared to what he has in Pittsburgh, I don't know if he's ready. Now, like y'all said, though, if they invest in that offensive line, getting a little bit of help, I think he would be better prepared, hopefully a little bit much more maturity in that system. I think he has a better chance. But right now, I don't know if Dwayne's that guy.
Yeah, I think, you know, what we talked about the issues with the Alabama quarterbacks. You could say the same thing about Ohio State quarterbacks. They haven't had the greatest track record in terms of NFL success. Sorry, Mike. We're gonna hope that Justin Fields is the exception to the rule. I think he is. I'm just saying in terms of the other guys. And then the other thing with Dwayne Haskins is I think that Pittsburgh's a better situation for him because being in Washington, he was a little too close to home. I think he needed to get, you know, I think he had some distractions being in, you know, in his hometown, in his home area. And I think that kind of, you know, hurt his development or hurt his maturity because he was already, you know, had a little lack of maturity from some of the decisions that he made, you know, during that year. So I think him being in Pittsburgh could be a good thing for his development. And I think at this point, man, the way that line is looking, at some point you might as well just just go ahead and if you're in tank mode, just go ahead and throw them out there and see what you got, because you got to make a decision. Because let's just say they wound up having a terrible year. They have a 4-12, 5-11, or 4-13, 5-12 record, and they have a top 5 pick. Like, you got to decide whether or not you're going to use that pick on a quarterback. So you got to see what you got in Dwayne Haskins and see if he's worth investing in, going forward. So there's some tough decisions that the Steelers are going to make. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in these next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'd agree for sure. So we kind of touched on a little bit. We touched on Dwayne Haskins' old team, the Washington football team, and we actually watched them get trounced by the Buffalo Bills this past weekend. So we've watched them now for the last 2 weeks, put up almost 30 points a game. If you're in Alabama, yeah, you really are. You go from like great collegiate franchise to a dumpster fire, unfortunately.
Absolutely.
But we saw the Bills put up 43 points on the Washington football team, and this is a defense nobody expected that from. This was a defense that was supposed to be significantly better, especially considering the fact you have 4 first-round picks all on defense. One of them you just paid a ton of money to, in Jonathan Allen. To you guys, what has happened to Washington's defense that they've just completely crumbled in 2021, at least just 3 games into the season?
For me, Kenny, if you're good,
no, go ahead.
It's the same thing with Pittsburgh. To go back to Pittsburgh, it's youth. Other than Big Ben and that offensive line going in the last year, I felt like they got so not cocky, but just comfortable with how good they know they are. You have Juju, you have Claypool, you have Johnson all making TikToks after they go 11-0, partying it up like they just won the Super Bowl and they know nobody can touch them. And it's a problem with guys my age. It's the problem with the youth. It's the problem with these cats that come out strong and start balling out, throwing people around. I'm not saying Chase Young is by any means like that. I'm just saying the team as a whole, I feel like, went into this year thinking we're the number one defense, and we can take on anybody. I don't know if all of them are feeling that way. I know a lot of them put in that work. I know Chase puts in that work. But at the end of the day, you need 11 guys and including the bench to be able to come in and give it their all. So if some guys don't prepare throughout the season, like that, you can't act like you're the number one defense going into a year, because like you guys say all the time, any given Sunday, and guys got to have that preparation. So to me, I'm only saying this because I have nothing to base this off of. I'm actually confused on why this defense isn't working the way it is. The only thing I can think of is mental error. Because physically, I'm seeing nothing wrong. Scheme-wise, I'm seeing nothing wrong. I don't see there being any problems. I don't see there being any mismatches or just wrong calls that are being called. But at the end of the day, I think it does come down to having youth, and I think it comes down to you guys needing to understand that, just because you have one good year doesn't mean the next year is going to duplicate that or reciprocate. You kind of need to, build off something. You can't just go into the next year thinking it's going to be the same, because the same way you're preparing for offenses are preparing for you. And now that they have a full tape on Chase, they kind of have an idea on, okay, well, I'm not going to say they're going to double him or triple him, because that doesn't matter. They're not getting through that boy. So you just try to avoid him as much as you can. You see Josh Allen rolling out to avoid him. You go to the weak side and you try to figure that out, and you try to expose their DBs. And that's honestly what happened. You try to expose their linebackers. How fast are they truly? You saw Moss, who was a great second-round pick, a great running back for them. Singletary went into this game. The last couple games, he's looked great. And then they just use Moss. So it's all about preparation, and it's all about the mentality you have week by week going into it. And I think not all of them, but a few of them are a little young. And I think those are those growing pains that every team kind of goes through.
Yeah, I think that the issue is their secondary. I think that you touched on it, Mike. I think the biggest issue is their secondary. Like, we know the strength of that defense is on the defensive line. And I just think that secondary is their weak point right now, because they're getting lit up in the passing game. That's really what's killing them right now. And we know what that is, because if you don't get to the quarterback, then it's on the secondary to hold up your defense. And so I think that's the biggest challenge that they have. And I know, because I had their defense in fantasy the first couple of weeks, and I got rid of them because they were just giving me nothing. So I just think that they're going to have to they're going to have to make some investment into that secondary. They tried a couple years ago with Josh Norman, and that didn't work out. And they really haven't been able to have that elite secondary since, if you go back to D'Angelo Halls or those days, they really haven't been able to Champ Bailey's. Those days they really haven't been able to have that elite secondary. So I think that's what's really hurting them right now, is that their secondary is just not holding up on the back end. And I think as long as they're doing that, especially now that Fitzpatrick is out, we don't know if Heineke's going to get exposed here. Now that the team's got film on him. And so Washington can be, they may be in some trouble now, because it's too late in the game to try to do anything to upgrade your secondary. So it is what it is at this point.
Right.
So it's going to be a challenge for them all season.
And to throw it out to Tony, not only Tony have his response on how he feels about Washington, but would you bring in a Richard Sherman to just have a practice or a tryout?
I was about to say that, actually.
Yeah.
I was going to say that because, well, and to be honest with you, and I don't know how y'all feel about it, I think honestly one of their biggest weaknesses is kind of the same thing with Josh Norman, is Kyle Fuller. He started in Washington, or is it Kendall Fuller?
I think it's Kendall.
Kendall.
Yeah, Kendall.
Brother, right? Yeah.
Started in Washington, got traded to the Chiefs for basically nothing, was a part of a great Chiefs defensive system. The Chiefs couldn't pay him, so he went back into free agency and went back to Washington and made all this money. Not discrediting that he's not a great corner, but I don't think he's as good as he thinks he is. And I think he was one of those, he benefited from being in such a great system. We've seen it. There's only been a handful of corners and a handful of those defensive backs from, we'll even go as far back as the Legion of Boom that was even successful outside of the Legion of Boom.
Those are the days, bro.
Exactly. Even look at that Bears defense from 2006, 2013. There was studs everywhere on the defensive side of that ball.
Those are the days, bro.
I remember. I watched those days. But yeah, I mean, you've got Kendall Fuller, who to me, I think they overpaid a little bit on as far as paying for him. I don't think he's as good as I think he probably thinks he is. But I mean, again, you're your biggest hype man. So if he believes in himself, more power to him.
Right.
I think Landon Collins, I think they overspent on Landon Collins a little bit. He was one of those, he was good with New York. Again, I think he benefited from a good New York system with a defense that was starting to make a turnaround. And they paid money on him. But yeah, I would say secondary is the weakest thing. I would definitely go out, try out a Richard Sherman. He's the best cornerback option that is available right now currently. We've seen him have success in the Legion of Boom. We've seen him have success in San Francisco under Robert Saleh. And I mean, as far as two defensive coaches together, you can't get much better than Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio together. Right. I mean, that is a nasty combination on defense. And to pair them with the young talent that they've got on that defensive front, to me, there's really no excuse that Washington doesn't have a perennial defense to even make up for the fact that their secondary is bad. But I agree with what Kenny said. I don't know how much Taylor Heinicke does as long as Fitzpatrick is out. But I'll be honest with you, too, at the same time, I don't really see much of a difference between Taylor and Ryan. If anything, I think you're actually in a slightly better position with Taylor Heinicke than you are Ryan, because at least Taylor gives you that mobility option and is willing to actually go out there and make those big plays and take those risks. Now, again, with that, risk comes reward. He could potentially get hurt, and then you're left with Kyle Allen as your starter, and then your season's definitely in the toilet if your defense isn't performing. But to me, that defense has to step up, and they have to do something as far as the secondary goes.
For me,
I think they're going to battle Tampa Bay though for Richard Sherman, because their secondary, their corner's been dropping like flies, so they may have to battle them for Richard Sherman.
But it's also one of those things I feel like personally, and to Tony's credit, I don't mean no disrespect. I played corner, I played safety, I love the game, and Kendall's one of those guys I like to watch. But you're acting like you deserve Kyle Fuller money. You acting like you're your brother. And at the end of the day, you're not. So I liked Kyle going to the Broncos. I actually predicted it on my podcast. I said with Vic Fangio, it was one of those things with, reuniting with Vic and reuniting with reuniting
Right
with
on,
Bryce
Jeff.
Callahan.
We like to see it, Jeff. We like to see it.
It's a great feeling, man. I feel outnumbered here, but it's
Hey,
all
I'm
good.
still
We got
Bears
love.
fan, too.
There's no
That's
beef.
right.
There's no beef with
That's
us.
right. That's
We
right.
don't have no problems with y'all.
It's
But
all good.
but yeah, I definitely felt like if it wasn't the Broncos, Kyle Fuller definitely should have teamed up with his brother. I feel like that would have solved a lot of these secondary issues. And Kyle is on a 1-year deal right now. So if these secondary issues do continue, maybe you don't need a Richard Sherman. Maybe you say, hey, I need you to go call your brother, tell him to come in. We want to talk to him, and let's pitch an idea. Let's pitch something special because, I mean, Kyle knows what it's like to in that secondary when you have a Khalil Mack type guy. And you have one right there, right before your eyes in Chase Young. And maybe Khalil Mack and then some, because this guy and in coverage, it looks so much better than Khalil did back in the day. It's very promising. So it's definitely one of those scenarios. Kyle's 30 now, he's getting up there in age. Kendall's getting up there in age. So come together, brother tandem. That's pretty dope. The Fuller brothers and in football team. So the triple Fs.
Cool.
I mean, it would be pretty sick. Now, are we just spitballing here, talking out of our butt? Yeah, but I definitely don't think I'm the first person to have thought that.
No, probably not at all. Alrighty, so I'm actually going to throw in a little bit of surprise topic before we get to our last one, just because I saw it on the news earlier in it, and I kind of want to get y'all's perspective on it. So earlier today, the Jags traded their former 9th overall pick, C.J. Henderson, to the Panthers for Dan Arnold and a 3rd-round pick. And they traded C.J. Henderson in a 5th. The Jaguars now only have 2 first-round picks in I think the last 6 or 7 years that are still on the roster. And that's Josh Allen on defense and Trevor Lawrence that they just got this past draft. And technically Travis Etienne, but he's
up for the
draft.
Yeah.
So what Kenny, what is going on with the Jags that you're just getting rid of all this first round talent? You got rid of Jalen Ramsey, you're getting rid of Henderson, you're getting rid of the core of your
Ngakwe, like the list goes on.
Allen Robinson.
I honestly don't know. And I live in Jacksonville, so unfortunately I have to watch this junk every week. So I actually want to see them be competitive. A couple years ago, they had that run to the AFC Championship. So it was a good time in the city. But since then, man, it's just gone to the toilet. And I honestly don't know what the plan is. To me, like that makes no sense to trade you trade a young cornerback. Like you're trying to build a team, you're trying to build a culture, you're trying to build a foundation of young players, of young talent. It just makes no sense to me for a tight end. For what? Like and this ain't no game changing tight end. Like this is a run in the middle tight end. Like what is he going to do to upgrade your offense? Like I don't get it. So I really don't understand this move at all. It really doesn't make any sense to me. And I don't know if this is Urban Meyer greasing the skids to head to USC or what. Like, but it just makes no sense to me, and I don't see like what purpose this move serves at all. So I'm baffled. It doesn't make any sense to me.
What about you, Mike? What do you think?
It's they are having the Rome complex right now, and it's a problem where it's like Rome wasn't built in a day, and we all understand that, but they don't. They think, and we just talked about Kyle Fuller. Kyle Fuller is a perfect example. He is a young cornerback that came into this league in 2014, I believe it was, and he didn't look great. Kyle Fuller didn't look great by any means for the first about year and a half. He wasn't developing the way we wanted him to because it wasn't mass production right away, but there's so much that goes into it. With these guys and cornerbacks, especially in DBs developing. It takes a while for them to get comfortable, for them to realize NFL routes are a whole different thing when it comes to wide receivers. And you really need to not only be watching for that, but you got to be watching for your assignment, watching for these blocks, watching for all these things that are going on the field at once. It's hard to adjust. I like CJ. I felt like CJ was a great pickup for them. I felt like there's a lot of potential there. Maybe he's never going to be that top 3 lockdown corner, but there's definitely a lot of potential with him moving forward. I think they gave up on him way too soon. I think it's that Jaguars type of complex of if you're not producing right now or you're not a perfect scenario, like Jalen Ramsey wasn't a perfect scenario because he talks too much. And that's understandable. That's the game. You have a lot of different egos. You have a lot of different minds. Sean McVay is one of those guys. If you talk too much, that's perfectly fine. Just show up on Sunday. That's all that matters. Don't do anything illegal and just show up and do your job and you're there. You know what I mean? So for me, I couldn't tell you what they're doing. I couldn't tell you what they're doing. Maybe there is some, higher upper where, we understand there's a full plan established going forward. And maybe they do have an idea going into free agency. We're going to get these corners. We want them better than CJ. Did you talk about Jesus?
Oh, hang tight. We're coming.
Jesus.
Yeah, hang in there.
Hold on. I'm trying to stay focused. But But yeah, it's definitely one of those conversations. I'm looking at it, and I just feel bad for CJ because you're trying so hard to establish yourself as that CB1, and you're definitely in a place where you can be that top defender. Aside from Allen, you'd be the best in the secondary. You definitely would be the leader for years to come. You'd be established while new guys are coming. Tony, you sound a little sick, brother.
Yeah, a little bit allergies.
I felt that, but it's definitely sad to see because I truly love Trevor Lawrence and Travis, and I love CJ. And it's just hard to see, like being given up on so early. It's just crazy to me.
I don't think it's a bad thing for him, though, because Carolina has a really good defense. So
without a doubt. No,
I think he's going to greener pastures.
Yeah,
I think
they're going to
better
flourish.
Situation for him. Yeah. So, I just think, unfortunately, that this is going to be a long rebuild for Jacksonville. And I don't know, swapping picks, maybe, moving up to the third round, that's that. The only thing that makes sense to me is, swapping a fifth for a third. So you kind of get a higher draft pick. So they can use that to upgrade your talent base. That's the only thing that makes sense to me out of this deal.
Right.
Yeah. And I think Mike and I actually talked about this a little bit last week. This to me is one of those. I'm not a big fan of how Urban Meyer has done his coaching staff in Jacksonville. It's terrible. It's a bunch of guys that I think Schottenheimer has been the most successful out of that entire coaching staff that he's got, which is really sad. And like you guys said, and Kenny, you can probably attest to it, especially living there in Jacksonville. This is one of those organizations, you have to be prepared to build for the long run. Look at how long it took for them to build up to that AFC championship game, 4 years ago. It took them a long time to get to there.
Absolutely.
They had to get Calais Campbell. They had to get AJ Boye. They had to get Jalen Ramsey. You had to put those pieces around Blake Bortles to help get him to put him in that position. And, now you're just like, okay, let's just, we didn't win this year. Let's just start over again. No, don't do that. And to me, this is why I was kind of upset that Jacksonville got Trevor Lawrence. Not saying that, Dallas.
Without a doubt. I was pissed.
Not saying that Dallas or anybody like that would ever get him. Good players go to the terrible franchises.
That's where his careers go to die, it seems like. So I can understand why you would feel that way.
And to be honest, looking at it, you want to know who immediately comes into my mind, and it's sad because I don't think he's as good of a quarterback as Trevor Lawrence. I immediately think of 2011 when they drafted Blaine Gabbert. Blaine Gabbert was supposed to be a top prospect out of college. They threw him to the Wolves, and Blaine Gabbert got eaten alive, and it completely ruined his NFL career. Now, he solidified himself as a solid backup. He's traveled everywhere. He's a journeyman. But think of what could have been, he and Byron Leftwich both on the Jag staff at one point. And what did they just do last year? Both won a Super Bowl, albeit, Blaine's backup behind Tom Brady, still got a ring. And yeah, I don't know.
Everybody flourishes after they leave Jacksonville.
Yeah, Allen Robinson. The only one that didn't is Allen Hurns, and I say that because he was with Dallas.
Yeah.
A couple big plays, but that's been about it.
You're right about that.
And so far, our last topic, and then we'll see about if we want to get into some Week 4 picks on what we think is going to happen. So we watched the defending Super Bowl champs, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, lose to Matt Stafford and the Los Angeles Rams. This was Tom Brady's first game in Los Angeles, and he is 0-1 in that city. Kenny, we'll start with you. Does this make the Rams now? Do you see them as legitimate contenders now that they beat, quote, one of the best teams in the league?
Yeah, absolutely. I said it before the season that, after that week 1 that, that Matt Stafford was going to be an MVP candidate, and he's just like really playing at a really high level. And they just have a lot of weapons on offense, and even the running game is starting to come along with Stoney Michel. He looked really good yesterday. So, and then with that defense that they have, and they're just going to be a problem for teams all season.
Right.
So yeah, they're definitely a Super Bowl contender. Now the question is what will Matt Stafford do on the big stage? I think that's the biggest question that has to be answered in terms of the Rams, because we've never seen him, win a playoff game. And even if we look at the beginning of this game, he was a little shaky. I think he started off like 1 for 6, so he had some little early game jitters, but then he settled in and played great. But as the stakes get higher, do those struggles extend themselves? So I think that's really the only question. Talent wise, they're definitely a Super Bowl contender, but it remains to be seen whether or not Matt Stafford is going to be a Super Bowl contending quarterback.
What about you, Mike? You obviously being a Bears fan, y'all had to deal with Matt Stafford for a long time. What do you think? Do you think this is a different Matt Stafford, or do you think this is the same Matt Stafford we saw? He just now has a team finally put around him.
Oh, it's the same Matt. It's the same Matt. And it was always all love for Matt. I felt horrible for Matt. I watched him play in person with Megatron. I've watched him do a lot of – I was actually at Megatron's last career game. Didn't know it at the time, but it was a great experience. It was Forte's last game as a Bear, freezing cold, Megatron's last game. And I've watched, Matt struggle a lot. But at the end of the day, I'm seeing nothing different. This is – the throws Matt makes, these are the decisions Matt makes. The only difference is the guys he's throwing it to are catching the ball. That's literally the only difference. Or they're where they're supposed to be. And he has this protection, and he has one of the best defenses in football. Don't care what anybody says about the defense, bringing back all 11 stars. I don't care. Aaron Donald and Ramsey on the same unit, I'm good, bro. I'll take them any day of the week, without a doubt. You have a lot of question marks with, Stafford's health. And I said it from the jump. Matthew Stafford going to the Rams or Tampa or anywhere with an established offense and a smart offensive coordinator is going to be a Super Bowl contender, regardless of how that defense looks. I truly feel that way, and I've always felt that way. I feel like right now he could have went to the Miami Dolphins, Will Fuller, Parker, Gaskins and all these other guys, and Jalen Waddle. He would make Jalen Waddle one of the best rookie wide receivers in the game right now. I truly feel that way. That's how Matthew Stafford operates. He's amazing. The one concern is health, and I hate to say it, but as amazing as this feels right now, I've also watched Matthew Stafford go down. I've watched him go down to little things, thumb surgeries, all types of things. So as long as he stays healthy, they are my Super Bowl favorite. And I had them winning going into this game on Touchdown Crew. I was the only person to pick the Rams. They said, don't bet against Brady. I'll tell you what, I've seen it in the past before. White boys out of Detroit, when they get the chance to shine in LA, they show. You got Eminem, now you got Matthew Stafford. They're showing out. They're not going back. They're not going back to Detroit, Michigan. So he's definitely riding this out. And if he can stay healthy, they're definitely my Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, I definitely agree because, growing up in Indianapolis, saw a lot of Detroit Lions games, saw a lot of Bears games, saw a lot of Bears versus Lions games. I agree with Mike. Matt had a lot of injury history, but I would say really for Matt, it was kind of the same way. You look at how Sam Darnold was with the Jets,
Right.
Last year and year before last. You look at how Trevor Lawrence is with the Jags right now. When you're with such a bad team and such a bad organization, and you feel that, okay, this is entirely on my shoulders, I'm supposed to be this great quarterback, which in Matt Stafford's case, he has, because he's produced even with basically nothing all these years. He puts his body on the line because he's like, what, I have to make the play. My other guys aren't making plays. I got to make the play. And he ends up risking it. Heck, look at one of the early games in his career that, Detroit versus like Cleveland. I think if I remember right, he separated his shoulder out of his socket, and he was like, "Okay, we're going in on the next play." And they're like,
Right.
"No," and he goes, "No, I'm going. Like, this is happening." So I mean, that just shows you the determination and what he does. Not only that, but like Mike alluded to, this is probably some of the best weapons he's had since Megatron and Golden Tate and a couple of the other guys that they had. I think Ebron was the tight end at the time. You have Cooper Kupp, who has reestablished himself as definitely that number one receiver for the Rams. The man is everywhere around the ball. He's able to make plays, able to make people miss. You have Robert Woods, who is still solid as well. really kind of surprised me is that Matt Stafford and Deshaun Jackson haven't really connected as much.
We
So
connected yesterday.
they did. They finally connected, but I don't know if you watched the first couple
Yeah.
through.
I definitely think that comes with time, though.
Yeah.
I do too.
Yeah.
We saw at the beginning, I didn't mean to cut you off, but we saw at the beginning of Tom in Tampa was a situation where he never hit Godwin. He never hit Godwin at all. And now you're seeing in the year 2, you're starting to see that a little bit more established. So it'll just come with time.
Yeah.
I agree.
But kind of the same thing with the Rams. They still have a very good offensive line. Much like Kenny said, you have a great running game in Sony Michel. You have, Henderson is also being able to run the ball now. And just Sean McVay's, the way that he manipulates that offense, the way that he draws up these different play designs to get the best out of every single player on that field. And we're just talking offense. I haven't said anything about, Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey, who is it? Joseph Day, number 69, the other
Leonard
interior
Floyd.
Leonard Floyd.
That D-line is stout, man.
Yeah, and again, it's the same thing. This is something that the Rams have built over long-term success. They've gotten these players. For some reason, they haven't decided to use a first-round pick, but they use first-round picks on other players to succeed. So, I mean, I really can't be mad as far as the process that they've used. But yeah, this is one of those that I'm thoroughly impressed for Matt. I'm happy for Matt, much like Mike said. I really hope Matt doesn't get hurt. I think with the position that he's in, I think with how Sean McVay is and the connection that they have, I don't think Sean McVay is going to let that happen if that is physically possible, because I think Sean McVay is going to be riding that offensive line to help protect him and keep him protected as this season goes on, for absolutely sure.
Yeah, I think that McVay, he just does a great job of, scheming, and it just seems like he just looks so comfortable. Matt Stafford looks so comfortable in that offense. Like,
Right.
he knows exactly where he wants to go with the ball. He just has a level of comfort with that offense, and he's just operating, and he's just really looking, just super comfortable. So it's going to be exciting to see. And, the fact of the matter is that they're just starting to, find their stride. We haven't seen them hit their highest point. Like, you know what I'm saying? So it
Right,
could
once they
actually
win
be
mid-season
even more
games.
dangerous. So it could be scary to see how, what levels they get to.
Right.
For sure. So, guys, I do want to kind of get your guys' perspective on at least 3 different games that took place yesterday, and I want to see what you guys think was probably the most surprising win out of these three matchups. So the Chargers beat the Chiefs 30-24. You also had the Bengals beat the Steelers yesterday as well, 24-10. And then you had the Seahawks losing to the Vikings 30-17. To you guys, which was the more surprising of the wins out of those 3 games?
I personally had Seahawks, only because on Touchdown Crew, I was the only one who said Bengals. After just facing them and watching what happened with the Steelers the week before, I bet on the Bengals. The Chiefs, I've said it from day one. I personally feel like Patrick Mahomes was gifted one of the best situations he could ever go into in NFL history. And now Sammy's gone, and now a bunch of other guys are gone. So I'm definitely starting to notice, now that guys are kind of detaching themselves, that Patrick's kind of acting. Not that Patrick's acting, but, guys on this team are starting to feel like, we're there. We got it. It's an easy dub going into every single week. But now defenses are kind of preparing for that offense. It's really just Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. And I know those are 2 big names. But, there are a lot of guys on there that, have kind of left. Sammy Watkins is gone. Clyde Edwards isn't that reliable. Kareem Hunt, look at what he did against the Bears.
Sorry, Mike. Trayvon Diggs just did a nasty pick 6 on Jalen Hurts. It's
really?
It's 26-7 right now.
On to the side. I was trying to pump it in the camera.
Oh, Dallas is winning 26-7.
Yeah, I had that too. Let's go, baby. But yeah, definitely. I felt like the defense isn't great on the side of Seattle, but with Kirk Cousins, I always bet against Kirk Cousins. It's just and Dalvin Cook was out, so it did surprise me.
I get it.
Yeah, especially with Madison being able to carry the team like he did in the running game, and for them to have as much success as they did. That, to me, all honesty, that was probably the biggest surprise. I kind of agree with you, Mike. It was one of those, after watching how the Bengals performed, Joe Burrow kind of really getting into a stride in year 2, and Pittsburgh being Pittsburgh, unfortunately, this year for them. And then even really the Chargers versus the Chiefs, out of that division, the Chargers is the only team to me that can give the Chiefs the biggest run for their money.
Right.
Probably next to the Raiders. And I would only say the Raiders just because defensively they have improved. And defensively, Kansas City has taken a major step back. So to me, that kind of doesn't surprise me. I think with Kansas City, for the entirety of the year, this is going to be one of those who has the ball last type of thing. And if you can make sure that you eat enough clock to keep the ball out of Patrick Mahomes' hands, you're going to be set. I think the biggest surprise, though, was the fact that the Vikings beat the Seahawks. The Seahawks are now 1-2. And the fact that they lose to the Vikings, a team that, to me, the Vikings were still kind of searching a little bit for an identity. Defensively, they're not as good as they've been in years past.
Right.
You do have Daniil Hunter, but I think he's actually injured, if I remember right. You got Everson Griffin back after his little mini journey across the NFL, and older. You got Harrison Smith, who is still a top safety, but again, he's also older. You got an older Patrick Peterson, but still potentially solid. And then you have, the biggest question has always been Kirk Cousins. What can Kirk Cousins do? I expected this offense to be a lot more potent. If you look at the weapons they have, you have Adam Thielen, you have Justin Jefferson. They got Dede Westbrook in free agency from Jacksonville.
Yeah, people forget about that.
Yeah, it's really good slot wide receiver.
Exactly. I'm like, I ain't gonna say that Minnesota has one of the best wide receiver cores, but I would put them.
Well, they're up there.
That's a really good core. No doubt.
Put that at what, 8 or 9?
Definitely a top 10. That's fair.
Yeah. So I mean, to me, for the fact that you beat Russell Wilson, I mean, even with Seattle's defense not near being a complete 180 from what it used to be and what we used to always know Seattle being.
Just a quick stat: that's the first time Minnesota's ever beaten Russell Wilson.
That's true. He was undefeated against them all the way up until that game. So,
which is another reason you should want out, Russ. Come on, baby.
Now, Mike, I do have to ask, even as I'm going to call myself a part-time Bears fan because I do like the Bears.
I accept you.
If you had to pick between Russ or Justin, who would you pick?
Justin 100%, because as a Bears fan, I've watched, like I said, I've watched Justin for a very long time. I believe in Justin. I believe in his mentality. I believe in his work ethic and everything he does. Russ would be a great addition for the next 2 to 3 years. But I'm not looking for the next 2 to 3 years because I've never had a true franchise quarterback ever. So I'd take Justin for the next 10 to 12 and what he could potentially be. Now, whether he'll be alive to see the next 10 to 12 years with the way Matt Nagy's been trying to kill him, I don't know. Now, I think it would get really ugly. I think it would get really ugly with Russell Wilson and Matt Nagy. I think Russell would be calling audibles all day. And I think that would be a very toxic environment just because Russell ain't gonna take that. Russell ain't gonna listen to that. And I thought that was probably a big reason to why that trade never went down in the beginning. Remember, we offered Kyle Fuller 5 first-round picks and Akeem Hicks. And there was talks that we offered Khalil Mack. They said no. And was it them saying no, or was it really them respecting?
That's true. They're nuts.
Yeah, it was definitely true. It was definitely something that was out there. It was talked about, but they said no because they believe in Russ. Now, truly, the way I look at it was the fact that I think Russ didn't want to go there. That's how I look at it, and I think they respected Russ enough to listen to that. Yeah, I'll take Justin any day right now.
So let me piggyback on that. So I'm gonna let you vent a little bit with this question. It's kind of a lob. So I was watching earlier today, or I was listening to Dan Orlovsky talk about
love that take today.
Yeah. So do you agree with him? Do you think that he literally just set Justin Fields up to fail on yesterday?
Without a doubt. And I know we're running low on time, so I'll keep it short. But anybody who's followed me ever, if you want to go on my Facebook all the way from 2019 to present day, I said from the jump, after that Philadelphia Eagles game, when you ran the ball a total of 10 times, when Cody Parkey, you blamed for losing that playoff game, actually outscored your offense, the offensive guru, the quarterback whisperer, I'm not seeing any difference. You get this Saints playoff game, and again, Cairo Santos, your kicker, outscores your offense. Both times in those playoff games, your offense scored 6 points. You've had Alex Smith, Patrick Mahomes, Andy Dalton, Mitchell Trubisky, Chase Daniel, Nick Foles, and now Justin Fields. And your offense, you're the quarterback whisperer, that's what you claim to be, looks the same every time. Now, gentlemen, I have one quick question before I continue. Are all of those quarterbacks I named, you say, different type of quarterbacks?
Oh, for sure.
So why does it all look the same? Why are these plays all the same? You're a quarterback.
Hey, that's a great point, man.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. And actually, I had a quote, but my phone died. Myles Garrett actually said after the game, they prepared the entire week for Justin Fields to be rolling out of the pocket. This man dropped back over 30 times. Did not run out of the pocket once. Why? Because those plays weren't designed that way. I feel like the way I said it on Touchdown Crew, and they called me crazy. Charles called me crazy. I said he is purposely going to not allow Justin Fields to look great because at the end of the day, he wants Andy back. I feel like when Justin's in, you have to look good because you've said you needed this to make your offense run. You said the playbook's completely open. And if Justin's in, you actually have to perform as Matt Nagy. You know, if Andy Dalton's in, you kind of have that excuse of, oh, well, I'm not going to open up the playbook until Justin's in. So now you got your hand forced. You were salty about it, you know, and you didn't want to give him that opportunity to succeed. Now, do I think it's his fault that Jason Peters can't block to save his life? Hall of Fame career, without a doubt. But as of right now, that's horrible. But the fact that you allowed him to go against Myles Garrett for 40 minutes,
just straight dropbacks and no rollouts like that.
It was horrible. It was horrible. And this kid, here's what bothered me the most. And I said I'll keep it short, so I'll keep it short. 3 minutes left in the game, gentlemen. You're down 20 points. As a Chicago fan, I watched Derrick Rose tear his ACL in the last minute of a game that was meaningless. That the Bills were up 20 plus points. So we understand that. We understand. Take these guys out if you're up or if you're down. 3 minutes left, and after getting sacked 7 times, you kept this kid in to get sacked 2 more times. Then he had to get an X-ray done on his hand because of that final hit. Matt Nagy should not only be fired, should have been fired this morning. He should never be allowed to mentor a quarterback ever again because all you did for years was ask for the opportunity to have a mobile quarterback and to run those plays. And now you finally have one and you feel some type of way about it. And that was disgusting. That was disgusting what he did. Intentionally or not, I don't care. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe you didn't plan that, but it was disgusting to watch.
And especially considering the fact that, you know, Mike, you and I alluded to it with you the other night, you know, this is his first mobile, raw, talented quarterback he's had since Patrick Mahomes. I mean, you know, Justin Fields has that potential. And like you said, the fact that he had him drop back and not roll out, you know, like you said, I watched a lot of Ohio State games the last couple of years with Justin Fields starting. What is the one thing that man is great at doing? Rolling out and throwing on the run and making plays. And the fact that he's not utilizing that as a coach, even if you're not the offensive coordinator, you don't have to call it play. Yeah, you're setting them up to fail.
And for me, it wasn't even the fact that you dropped back 30 times. To keep it short again, you know, if you want to sling it, sling it. And I know you don't have a lot of time to, but I didn't see Jimmy Graham and Cole Kmet not even present in that game. You did not utilize a Hall of Fame tight end and a guy who worked with George Kittle all summer and Jimmy Graham at all. Allen Robinson, a top 10 wide receiver and an amazing deep threat, did not run more than 10 yards that entire game. And you preached this entire offseason that we are one of the fastest teams in the league. We are. Offensively, we are, without a doubt. Other than Baltimore and a couple other teams, you have Goodwin, you have Cohen, you have Justin Fields, you have Darnell Mooney, who all run 4.4s flat. Like, these guys are dogs. So you finally have this speedy offense that once you wish you had when you only had Taylor Gabriel. Now you have it. And I only see these guys running 5-yard screen passes. You set this kid up to fail. And you just tried to prove a point that he's not ready. It's not that he's not ready. It's Matt Nagy's not ready. And I don't think he ever will be.
There it is right there. I think you said it all. That the fact that he dropped
I've been holding this
times.
for 3 years.
Yeah, yeah. And then the other thing was another great point that was made was like, you didn't max protect for him. Like you left him, you know, just 5-on-4 or 5-on-5 and for the entire game. Like you got to give this guy a chance to have time to, because again, he's young. he's going to need time to be able to survey the field and be able to make his read. So he
Right.
needs that extra time. So the fact that you didn't have extra blocking for him, and you just like that's really bad. You just set him up to fail. And if the fact that you did that, and that's your first round pick, like that's really an indictment on you, because Mike, how long have you guys been waiting for a franchise quarterback? Was it
Well, I'm
30 years
21.
now?
I'm
Nope.
21, and there wasn't one before me, and there wasn't one
Yeah, as
during
long as
me.
you've been
So,
alive. So,
yeah,
and even
And
longer. So the fact of
and
the
to
matter
add
is
to that,
you
they traded up to get him.
right.
exactly. So why would you set this guy up to fail? That just makes no sense to me.
And to me, it was also one of those things where fine, don't use Jimmy Graham, whatever. Don't use Cole Kmet, whatever. But then have them block, have them help Jason
Exactly.
Peters
A
with Myles
chip,
Garrett.
something.
But you just had them, all right, roll to the side. We're going to do this little tiny curl route and then blah. But I will say this. Cleveland came to play. And the Rams, amazing Super Bowl contenders. Cleveland, amazing Super Bowl contenders. I did not expect Justin to ball out against these guys whatsoever. I did think the Bears played an amazing defensive game. At halftime, it was a 7-point game. They have the best offensive line in the league, one of them, and the Bears had 5 sacks. So I was really impressed with what I saw by them. Even though Landry was out, early on in this game, that's perfectly fine. I think we were in there. We were ready. If we had someone like a Brian DeBall, offensive coordinator of the Buffalo Bills, I definitely think that's my head coach opportunity going into this offseason. I'm not going with Eric Bieniemy. I'm tired of the Andy Reid tree. I don't trust it. It's toxic. They're poisonous. I don't want them. But it's definitely one of those things where I'm looking at it like this defense can hang. The fact of the matter is they were on that field for 40 out of 60 minutes, gentlemen. 40 out of 60 minutes. You had a net of 1 yard throughout that entire game. Do you know, you want to hear something interesting? And I'm a Money Mitch supporter. Mitchell Trubisky actually played in that Buffalo game. You want to know how many yards he had? 1 yard. The same amount of yards as Matt with one throw and 1 yard. He went 1 for 1 with 1 yard. That's the same amount of yards as Matt Nagy had the entire game. So, but Mitch was the issue.
Oh,
Mitch was
that's
the
bad.
scapegoat.
That's so bad.
It's insane to me. It's insane to me to think not only did Mitch come back to Chicago and ball out on Matt Nagy, but he had the same amount of yards as you and he only threw the ball once? Dude, like, I don't know. I've said it for 3 years. He's egotistical. He's psychotic. Bill Lazor should be taking over for the rest of the year. We won 4 games straight with Bill Lazor last year, and then Nagy took over again and we lost. So I've completely lost my mind. Shout out to Freddie. You're going to have a top 3 pick next year, regardless of whether it's the Giants or not. It's definitely going to be the Bears as one of them. So you might have 1 and 2. Who knows?
True, they might have 2 top 5 picks.
He really
So
might.
now, do you get? So you already said that, that Nagy's gone. Do you get rid of the GM as well?
Yes. Yes.
Here's what I'll honestly say, and I'm going to be so real about it. He's not going to go simply based off the fact that he got saved. Guys like, and I've said it with Tony before, guys like Khalil Mack don't become available. Guys like Justin Fields don't drop. So the fact that you picked up both of those guys, I think he can make the argument of, okay, give me a couple more years to fix this offensive line. It's the final piece, which the quarterback was the final piece for all these years. But now it's the offensive. It's always something. It's always something. So I definitely think maybe the McCaskies are dumb enough to give him the benefit of the doubt because he's definitely not it. Great at drafting defensive players and later round players, but he does not address an offensive line whatsoever. I like Daniels. I like Whitehair. The rest of them are horrible. So I don't think he'll be gone, but I think he should be gone.
I think he should be, and I say that much to your credit, Mike. Like you said, guys like Khalil Mack don't just become available. He went out and he rebuilt a phenomenal defense for the Bears, and you did end up getting your second quarterback since being the GM. This is part of the reason why I say I would fire him, even if you don't want to blame Mitch, as it's not a Mitch problem. The fact you gave up so much to be the second overall pick to go get Mitch.
Yeah, without a doubt.
When you could have other quarterbacks, which there's every time we look at it back now, you could have done this, you could have done heck, right. Teams could have drafted Tom Brady in 1999 with the first overall pick,
exactly, or Aaron Rodgers. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, exactly. looking back, you can make every change in the world and it doesn't really matter. But the fact that you've done all of this, you made all of these investments, and only really on the defensive side of the ball, it's panned out because unfortunately with the situation that Justin Fields is in, we don't know if it's going to pan out or not. Personally, I hope it pans out because I want to see Justin succeed because I watched him at Ohio State. I think he does have all the talents and all the intangibles to be a phenomenal quarterback. To me, there's 2 GMs that should be fired and never have a GM job again. That is Ryan Pace and Howie Roseman for the Eagles.
Add Dave Gettleman to that list.
Dave Gettleman should have been fired years ago, and I mean, it's the Giants, so I mean, they kind of their own mess.
Like I definitely think Ryan would be in that scouting department. I definitely think he's one of those guys who you would want on a team to scout defensive players, and to find later round talents, but to have that overall decision and impact. Like I'll say this, to his credit, you brought in Vic Fangio, an amazing defensive coordinator. You brought in a Matt Nagy from the Andy Reid tree. He looked great. He won Coach of the Year in 2018. So you really couldn't have saw that coming. Whatever's going on in Matt's head was not originally here. That's the problem. Whatever happened with Matt after winning Coach of the Year, I feel like is a totally ego maniac type deal. Kenny, am I wrong on thinking that though? Because Chicago, we gave him all of this love.
But to be fair, well, he did, one Coach of the Year. They made a couple, he made the playoffs,
right?
A few times. So he he does have some things on his resume to say that he, you know what I mean?
Without a doubt. But it was one of those things for me. What started it was Jordan Howard. Jordan Howard being on the Bears, 3 to 4 back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. Matt Nagy comes in. This guy turns into a bum. Why? Didn't make sense to me at all. And especially, Mitchell Trubisky's development, it just felt like you didn't care to develop Mitch. If you don't fit his system, you don't work, and you're not going to be there. Riley Ridley, Calvin Ridley's brother, cut from the team in year 3. Why? Never even got a chance. Saw the field probably 5 times, as many fingers as I have on this hand. Why? You never gave him the opportunity, even when we were short at offense and wide receiver, and it's because you don't fit that system. But if you claim to be an offensive guru, an Andy Reid tree, and a disciple of that, you need to be better. You need to be able to make players better and play to their strengths, not them play to yours, because that's not how a coach works. That's how an offensive coordinator works, and the coach works around that, and the coach says, okay, well, I'll use this, this, and this. But we said it earlier, and it was said on TV too. I don't know if you guys caught it. Not a single head coach has won a Super Bowl when they're actually the ones calling plays. When they have an offensive coordinator, they definitely look great. But when you're actually the only one calling plays, Bill Lazor does nothing. I understand Sean McVay calls plays. I understand Andy Reid does his thing, but they also have someone in their ear suggesting what to do, and they base it off of that. And they say, okay, well, here's what I think we should do.
Right.
Nagy brings in bums. He brings in bums. No, and I mean that in all respect in the world. He brings in bums who have no threat of taking his job. So right now you're at a point where it's like, who is going to take his job? And what bothered me the most is you want Andy Dalton to start, but you don't want Bill Lazor, Cincinnati's former offensive coordinator and play caller, to be calling plays. Don't you feel like Lazor and Dalton would be able to connect well because they've been together for years? So none of it what I say the most, the very Chicago thing, I'm gonna give y'all some. Make it make sense, bro. Make it make sense. Because what you're telling me right now, you're feeding me is crap. Make it make sense. And I won't say anything. But everything you're feeding me, bro, tastes awful.
Yeah, and I'm gonna kind of comment on what Anthony said and kind of piggyback off of what Mike. Is the coach to blame or the offensive coordinator for not picking the plays that fit Justin? Honestly, that's the coach and that's the offensive coordinator.
It's both of them.
Yeah. And I say that because Justin's a rookie. Justin's learning this system. Justin is getting into this. He's not an established quarterback like Patrick Mahomes. Even for all of Jared Goff's weaknesses, Jared Goff had established himself. Hey, if I want to make an audible at the line, I can. Justin can't do that yet. He's too new. They're going to pull him out of that game so fast. Everybody's head's going to spin now. The question of not whether Nick Foles is going to suit up, because apparently Nick Foles. Yeah. I think Nick Foles just wants to go to Indianapolis and uproot Carson Wentz again.
As he should.
The ultimate petty move to be
ruining that man Carson's career. But that was a big thing I pointed to too. like we were talking about, 3 minutes left, sacked 7 times. This is your franchise quarterback going into the future. You don't want a Joe Burrow situation. Going in the year 2, Kenny, I know you can agree with me. Tony, I know you can as well. You want a quarterback to be learning what he's already been processing through year 1, not rehabbing an ACL injury where he doesn't get a chance to, develop. He's trying to focus on just getting back to the field. Not having Foles in those last 3 minutes when he's suited up with his helmet on, to Dan's point, it was either completely moronic or it was intentional. And you just wanted to feed us that Justin's not ready and trying to prove to us that Justin's not ready. Anybody who watched that game, they say, oh, well, if I took out Justin, you all would have complained. Anybody who watched that game would not have complained about taking out Justin in the last 3 minutes.
Because what does Justin learn by getting sacked more?
Yeah, he just losing confidence.
He learns his hand hurts.
Let me ask you this though. You made a great point. I didn't even think about this. Is the fact that Bill Lazor and his history with Andy Dalton, did they conspire to set up Justin Fields to fail to make sure that there was no question that Andy Dalton should be back as the starter when he gets healthy?
Oh, no doubt. No doubt that there's no chance in hell that that's happening. And I'll tell you why. Because Bill has no say in what happens anyways. Bill does nothing. It's all Nagy. Bill is a patsy. Bill is just there to fill the position. Nagy does not listen to Bill. Nagy does not have anything to do with Bill whatsoever. The fact of the matter is this. When Nagy put in Nick Foles, they won a couple games. And that was cool. That was sweet. We went 5-1. Then you lost 7 straight, 1 to the Lions. So then Bill Lazor takes over play calling with Mitchell Trubisky and wins 4 straight. And then out of nowhere, Nagy takes back play calling and you lose 2 in a row. 3 in a row, technically, if you count week 1 as well, going into the following year. So, dude, what are we doing? Lazor felt so comfortable with this offense. Mitchell Trubisky went out there and said, it's nice when you actually have someone who's willing to listen to what you want to run and what you feel capable running. He said that when Lazor was taking it. I'll send you guys that link if you want it. Like
I believe you.
It's an amazing listen.
That's a definite shot.
Mitch was one of those guys who never spoke on anything. He let it ride. Nagy's one of those guys pointing fingers. You know what I mean? So to me, like, I'd rather have Lazor calling plays for Justin right now than Nagy, because I truly feel like the one that's out to get him at the end of the day is Matt Nagy, simply based off the fact that he doesn't want him to play because that means he has to do his job.
Yeah, and to kind of answer Kenny's question as far as that goes, I don't think it's the case. Because I don't think Matt Nagy's going to let that happen. I think Matt Nagy's a bit of a control freak. But 2, there's a reason why they got rid of Andy Dalton and Bill Lazor in Cincinnati. Whether or not it was because time was just up, it was time to move on. They got removed from that organization for a reason. If you look at 2015 and on, I think 2015 was probably the last decent Bengals season that we saw out of that team. I mean, other than that, they've unfortunately been a dumpster fire, even with a great player in AJ Green. When he was healthy, Tyler Eifert was solid. You had Giovanni Bernard, you had Joe Mixon.
Has some offensive talent for sure.
Yeah, offensive talent. You had Andrew Whitworth as your left tackle for years. And then you look on the defensive side of the ball. That defense was almost always top 10. They were probably, I would say, one of the most underrated defenses of the last decade.
Yeah.
As far as their ability to perform, their ability to take takeaways, man coverage, zone coverage, all of it. But again, there is a reason why Andy Dalton left, and now Andy Dalton has become, unfortunately, a journeyman quarterback. I don't know. I really can't think of any other spot, maybe other than Washington, where Andy Dalton goes and he gets a start. Maybe Houston if Tyrod Taylor doesn't work out. But I think if anything, you're hurting yourself if you don't get Tyrod Taylor back. Because I think Tyrod's a better quarterback than Andy, to be honest with you. And then Bill Lazor, yeah, like Mike said, Bears went 4-0 with Bill Lazor. And I think that's one of those. Matt Nagy felt threatened because wait, he has success. I could get fired? No, I'm taking this call.
That makes no sense to me because you're ultimately you're winning, so you're the one that's going to get the credit as the head coach. And you're the overseer of the. You're supposed to be the overseer of the team. So the fact that you have success on the offensive side, the credit's going to go to you credit going to go to you ultimately anyway? So
Well,
that's an insecurity.
Like to Tony's point, that's not how a control freak works. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? At the end of
that's insecurity. Yeah,
it's insecurities and egos being tampered
no doubt.
that the offense doesn't believe in me anymore. It's not that at all. You're a great head coach. That guy at some point could make you want to run through a wall. Club dub. It was so much fun. I don't know if you guys follow baseball, but Matt Nagy to me is Joe Madden for the Chicago Cubs. And that magic and that spark only works for so long until you start realizing you're not making adjustments. You're just banking on us being great. And at the end of the day, you need those extra practices. You need those extra ideas that, you're bringing in with other coaches, and you're not. So at the end of the day, Matt's got to check himself. And I think being fired at the end of the season, if he's not, we'll see Mike Hughes at Hallis Hall. But, to be continued. But it's definitely going to be a rough and shaky future. I would not let him touch Justin Fields ever again.
Right.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
All right, gents. Well, I think that's everything that we got. It has been a blast talking with y'all. Kenny, thanks for having, Mike and I on. Hopefully we filled in well for Freddie and Jay.
Always good talking with you guys.
Yes,
we didn't have any delusional Freddie facts, although I feel like I needed to spit a couple.
Yeah, no, we're good on that.
We're good. It was refreshing.
Absolutely.
Right. But much love to Freddie, though, even though Freddie spits some crazy facts. Freddie does still spit some truth at times. And, if anything, Freddie always has personality. Well, I 100% mean that.
He's got heart at the end of the day.
He does. Freddie has a lot of heart. He does. He does. All right, everyone. But this has been another episode of Real Talk here on the ASAP Sport Network with my man, Kenny, and with, of course, the voice of the Windy City itself, Mike Hughes and Tony. Y'all have a good night. Thanks for watching. Hope y'all enjoyed.
This is
Hall Sports All Plays. Hall Sports All Plays. Hall Sports All Plays. 365, we making a plays. We talking the game, get you through the days. We're high in the court, the dime in the lane. Variety topics, living the same. All presentation, sports information. Hitting the airways, taking the nation. All sport, all plays, they working your faces. Grace at the field, so tie the laces. Hall Sports All Plays. Hall Sports All Plays. Network. We on top of our game. Hall Sports All Plays. Hall Sports All Plays.